Welcome back. You are listening to Nate the Hate on YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, and Google Podcast. Be sure to like the video and subscribe. Today we have a fun video for everybody. We are going to predict what's going to be in the Indie World Showcase for Nintendo on Tuesday. And joining me today is MVG.
What's up, Nate? Great to be here. Thanks for having me back.
Great to always have you. And I have to give a warning for this episode to not operate heavy machinery while listening, because this is going to be an ASMR heavy show, because we have GameXplain's John Cartwright joining us today as well.
Hey there, Nate. Thank you for having me on.
You were warned, people. You were warned.
I got as close as I could to the microphone.
So today's episode is dedicated to Dill Spouser, who was a collective effort to donate $146. Thank you for your donation and generosity. And for those who are confused as to what or whom Dill Spouser is, it is the fusion of Doug Bowser and Phil Spencer. You can see a picture of this character prominently placed in the upper right corner. Yes, it is horrifying. We agree. So let's get right into the topic today of the Indie World presentation from Nintendo and giving some predictions of what we think will be at the show. And this is going to be a difficult video to really give predictions because indies are unpredictable. You never know which company will be highlighted by Nintendo. And even if you do have a general idea of what company could be there, you don't know what they're making. Indies are always, they're challenging to predict of what they're up to, and sometimes an indie comes out of nowhere with a brand new IP that shocks us, and other times they just make an iterative sequel to one of their more well-known IP. So let's start off with a bigger title. Let's start with No More Heroes HD, because this was leaked recently by the South Korea Game Ratings Board. And we know about No More Heroes 3, and now we know about No More Heroes 1, HD. What are the odds that both of these titles, or at least one of these titles, appears in the Indie World presentation? And we'll start with John on this one. What do you think?
Seems pretty likely to me. So we had Travis Strikes Again, which was debuted, I believe, when it was called Nindies, when it's called the Indie Showcase. So I guess that's why we think this might appear in an indie presentation. But otherwise, No More Heroes 3 typically appears in their bigger directs. I think it was in one of their E3s at one year. So I'm not sure if I'd expect No More Heroes 3, but a HD remaster seems pretty likely for this venue, especially because it was rated, meaning it's likely to release relatively soon. So personally, yeah, I think No More Heroes 1 HD could appear, and I wouldn't even be that surprised if it releases in, either it shadow drops or it releases within a month span of this presentation.
Yeah, I'm kind of anticipating a shadow drop for No More Heroes due to that ratings listing. And what good way of marketing to lead up to No More Heroes 3 than having the first game out on the eShop right away on Tuesday, where people can download it for, probably an affordable price of maybe $19.99, because they did HD it on the PS3, though that port was subpar. That's probably being generous. And, you have the Joy-Con, so you can still do the motion controls and such. So it would be a nice little shadow drop title for them. And, yeah, No More Heroes 3 does kind of seem like a wild card. It could be at this one. Maybe it's at another direct later this summer. We're still kind of anticipating that it is going to come out in 2020, though I would entertain the idea that maybe it gets pushed to 2021 at this point. And I believe it was GameXplain who did the interview with Grasshopper, where they did express interest in bringing No More Heroes 1 and 2 to the Switch.
That's right. Yeah, that's a little while ago now. Actually, in that interview, that was before No More Heroes 3 was properly announced, I think. We've done a couple with Suda. But in one of them, he was hinting towards No More Heroes 3 and about Travis having to take the glove from Travis Strikes Again and use it to defeat some supervillains. And that's exactly what's going on in No More Heroes 3. So I'll take quite a bit what he said at face value there. And he definitely was quite outspoken about bringing No More Heroes 1, No More Heroes 2, and even Killer 7, which I think might have just been debunked, but it definitely has the interest in bringing these titles over. So wouldn't be surprised at all.
Yeah, Killer 7 was debunked earlier. It was the LinkedIn profile user, the gentleman, had to come out and say I am working on a prolific Japanese title, but it's not Killer 7 for Switch, and the banner was, we had, I guess, intentions of bringing it to Switch, but we only brought it to PC. And it sounds like the situation with that game is actually Capcom has to be the one to sign off on it to bring it to consoles, whereas the PC version, I believe, was published by NIS America, at least in the Western markets. So it does seem to be some complications there. But, I mean, if Capcom sees value in it, or if it's a cheap enough port, I'm sure Killer 7 will eventually make its way to consoles. It just seems like that listing wasn't as definitive as people had hoped. But it sounds like we have some hope that No More Heroes could appear at the Indie World event. So that should excite some people who really enjoy that series. Let's get into another big title, Hollow Knight SilkSong. It's been a while since we've heard about this one, and what a better venue than the Indie World Show in 2020 to reintroduce this title to everybody. What do you guys think the chances are we see of this?
I think we'll see it. I mean, when was the last time we heard it? Was it February of like last year or something? It's been a while since.
It's been a long time.
Yeah, so I think it's time that we get to see more of this game. Whether they'll put a release date on it, I mean, potentially, but I mean, I would say we're going to see more about this game. What do you guys think?
Well, I remember Hollow Knight for Switch was shadow dropped at their E3 one year, so clearly they view this franchise as a big priority.
Yeah.
So I do kind of wonder if they'd save it for like a proper direct, because this is one of the largest indie titles at the moment. People went nuts for the original Hollow Knight. So like, yeah, it would be a big deal to have it during this event, but they could also very easily save it for something much bigger.
That's true, and I know a lot of people say, well, you know, what about like COVID? Could have it impacted the development of SilkSong? Because we know Team Cherry's only 3 people. And yeah, I mean, there's definitely a chance it could have been impacted, but with the 3 people, they may still been able to work fairly efficiently on the title, depending on how they are set up in Australia, I believe they are located. So if they already do some remote work, development for them may not have, you know, really hit that much of a halt, but they could have been challenged by Nintendo's lot checking, where even if they wanted to get the game out, maybe they, you know, kind of got stuck in the traffic and the lot check, and that caused a minor delay. But yeah, I would love to see Hollow Knight SilkSong. It has been a while, and it seems like due to the wait we've had that the game is probably becoming larger in scope than maybe what they had originally envisioned for it.
Yeah, I think the difficulty, you know, with a 3-person team, it's very streamlined, and you can get stuff done quickly. But the difficulty is if one person, for whatever reason in that team, is unable to work at their maximum potential, then it affects pretty much everything. And that's kind of the drawback of a small team, that if there is a delay, then, you know, it's basically things kind of just come to a standstill at that point, and it's very difficult to accurately come up with any idea of when we think this game's going to get, you know, released, you know.
Mm-hmm. To speak further to something that Nate said about the platform holders having to actually get these games on their systems. Forgive me because I forget the title of this game, so if anyone knows it, then chime in. But there was a developer earlier in the week who was upset that their game on PlayStation 4 didn't sell as much as Switch and Xbox.
Yes.
And a big reason for that was because Sony wouldn't apply the launch discount because they just didn't have time to. So there's definitely aspects on the platform holder side which can also impact not only the development of titles, but just getting them on the systems and getting them to sell. So for a lot of indie developers, it's better for them just to like hold it out and wait until things are a bit more natural for them to release their games.
Yeah, that was No More Robots, I think. Mike Rose.
That's the one.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that game. I think it's getting a physical release on the Switch fairly soon, actually.
Yeah, and he was very quick to let people know that Switch sales were just, you know, 300% more than the PlayStation 4 ones from the eShop versus the PlayStation Store.
That's amazing. I mean, the Switch has been a haven for a lot of indie developers, especially with certain genres of the indie games. Like if they're a Metroidvania, they seem to do really well on the Switch. We just saw Bloodstained was the best-selling platform, or the Switch was the best-selling platform for Bloodstained 2 that came out, I believe, was it last month or 2 months ago?
Mm-hmm.
So Switch is doing, you know, it's kind of that golden goose for a lot of indie companies. And hey, you keep running on that train as long as it keeps providing for you. Now, here's another thing. We'll go with another DLC. what about Cuphead Delicious Last Course? Was supposed to come out last year. They then announced that it was going to be delayed. And the last time we heard about this was with a trailer, and I believe it was last July. And all we've heard from the Cuphead side is that they just brought Cuphead to the PlayStation 4, but we haven't heard anything about Delicious Last Course in over a year. Would you expect Nintendo to potentially have that next first look at the DLC for Cuphead, or do you think Microsoft would probably still kind of leverage their role in that game's development to make sure they secured it first?
I'm such an idiot for not realizing that Delicious Last Course just equates to DLC.
Yeah, actually, yeah. I just realized that too. What the hell?
We're all idiots.
I guess we are, yeah.
But yeah, I feel like Microsoft would probably be the hosts of this, especially because they've got multiple presentations coming up. They just had one, which had, I think they had the Outer Worlds DLC in their last Xbox presentation. So I would expect probably Microsoft will showcase this themselves. It's a different kind of idea to when they debuted Cuphead for Switch, because that was primarily just a Switch-focused event, whereas this is across multiple platforms. So yeah, personally, I wouldn't expect Cuphead here.
That's a lot of removing of the wind from the momentum of this event.
I'm gonna say I'm gonna counter that and say I think we will see Cuphead DLC at this event. I think Nintendo took the original announcement, and I think this is just going to continue on from that.
Let's bring a little more hype back into this indie event right there. Good job, MVG. Now, because Cuphead's relation to Microsoft, we'll kind of stay on that topic just for a second here. Last year at the Indie World event, we had Moon Studios and Xbox Game Studios announce Ori and the Blind Forest for the Switch. And a lot of people, it was anticipated. We had the rumors, we had the talk for months leading up to this. And it was a high quality port. In some ways, it was superior to the original Xbox One version. Now they have the, Ori Will of the Wisps is on Xbox One and PC. And the developers did an AMA on Reddit earlier this year where they were asked about a Switch port for Will of the Wisp. And the developer said it would be challenging to get the game at 60 frames a second. They didn't, it's kind of, to me, that's oddly specific if you weren't working on a port. It's basically saying if we were to bring it to Switch, it'd probably be 30 frames a second, which in all truth, it was generally 30 frames a second on the Xbox One to begin with until they patched it and fixed it and optimized it. So what do you think we have a chance of seeing Ori return to Switch and seeing Will of the Wisp at this event?
It was a really demanding game, wasn't it? I viewed it on PC and there was a bunch of issues at launch. I think they fixed up a lot of them now. I was streaming it on xCloud just yesterday and it was running really well. So I kind of already had that kind of like portable Will of the Wisps experience. And if they were to bring it to Switch natively, that'd be awesome. You know what? I'm going to say yeah. I'm going to say like it is weird that Ori and the Blind Forest came to Switch and it sold so well, but they were just quiet on any potential of Will of the Wisps coming to Switch, especially because it was such a prominent title of that indie showcase. So yeah, why not? Let's say Will of the Wisps will be here.
I would agree. I think it was very successful the first time round. I think it's going to continue. I mean that's a very like you said, Nate. That's a very specific response. To the question. It just kind of tells me that there's a possibility that we'll see a new Ori game, and if there is to be, then I would say yeah, we'll see it on the indie showcase.
Yeah, I have to agree with both of you. I expect to see Ori Will of the Wisp be announced for the Switch at this event because they did bring the last one a year ago, almost to the day. So nice little tradition. Keep announcing Ori games for the Switch, and Metroidvanias and the Switch, they work so well together, especially since Nintendo continues to refuse to give us a new Metroid game. So if Moon Studio wants to give us a quality one, let's do it.
Go for it. Actually, speaking of Xbox a moment, a couple of Switch games support Xbox Live. Ori and the Blind Forest is an example of that. And it just feels like more and more Xbox games are very likely to be announced for the Switch in the future. And I'm thinking about one that isn't necessarily an indie. I mean, I struggle to call Ori an indie because it's backed by Microsoft. But I do wonder if Battletoads has a chance of coming to Switch.
Ooh, that is a good example. That would actually, just from a nostalgia standpoint, you'd have to kind of think of how much potential it would be to bring Battletoads to the Switch. Now, I mean, I wouldn't expect the new Battletoads to be announced for Switch at this event, only because it probably removes some of that launch momentum from the release coming up. But I could see a port maybe 6 months down the line, definitely, because there's nothing really demanding about the game. And again, from the nostalgia standpoint of playing Battletoads on like the Super NES and stuff, there's some potential there. That's not a bad idea. I like that thought. Damn. Now I kind of want that. Especially after like Streets of Rage 4 was so good on the Switch. I mean, if you can give us more beat 'em ups, and there's been a lot of beat 'em ups on the Switch.
Yeah, and most of them are of pretty good quality, you know. So if they can nail the fighting mechanics, which everything I've heard so far is that aesthetically it looks a little bit like a Flash game, but it plays really well, and that was kind of my initial thoughts about Streets of Rage 4. I wasn't in love with the graphical style, but man, when you play that game, they nail the feeling of, you know, old school fighting games like Final Fight and Double Dragon. So, you know, if they do that again with Battletoads, I'm all in on that game.
Yeah, Battletoads, it's a weird game to look at, I think, in like screenshots and such, but when you're playing it, the style makes sense, if that makes any sense whatsoever. Like, it's kind of the game you have to see in motion for yourself, and then you just kind of, you no longer see those visual problems because you just enjoy the core gameplay mechanics that it's offering. So I would love that as a surprise announcement of all of a sudden they're like, oh yeah, we're also bringing Battletoads this month to Switch with cross-platform play with the Xbox version. That would shock a lot of people.
Yeah. It's always hard to draw the line what an indie game means, because Battletoads surely isn't an indie game. I think the studio making it might be. It's Dallas Studios, I think they're called. But yeah, I'd love to see it happen, and hopefully, if it could be a great double barrel announcement, have Will of the Wisps, and then followed by Battletoads immediately after.
Yeah, that'd be big for Microsoft to be like, yeah, we're still supporting the Switch, even though we had publicly said we're not bringing any more of our IPs over. But
yeah, we can't bring games to our own system, so we may as well give it to Nintendo.
That's harsh. Poor Microsoft. Aren't they already having a rough month, and you have to go like that to them?
They've got Halo 4 coming to PC this year. They'll do fine.
That will probably sell very well for them. Let's see. Another kind of Xbox related. This game was shown at Microsoft's E3 conference last year. It is Spiritfarer from Thunder Lotus Games. They made Jotun and Sundered, and their visual style is undeniable. It's beautiful. They use a really artistic approach to their games, and it was announced for Switch and other platforms, but it's still just kind of stuck with a summer 2020 release. So now it seems like the time, date it. So what better event than, to date your summer release than an indie show, especially with this caliber of a game. And it'd be a pretty big, stage for a developer like them. You've already had Microsoft, now give it to Nintendo, because again, the Switch would probably be the best-selling platform for such a game. You think we see Spiritfarer get released, or release date at this event?
I think it's very likely, yeah. This is kind of the time to really get your eyes on any indie game. So yeah, absolutely. I think there's a good chance of this showing.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the stage is set for Spiritfarer at this event. I mean, you're right. I mean, I'm looking at Nintendo's website now. It just says available 2020. I mean, I think it's, this is the event that we'll see more about this game.
Now, another game that was supposed to be available in summer 2020 is Golf Story's spiritual sequel, I guess you could call it, with Sports Story. We haven't heard of it since it was announced. We haven't been given any update, but it was recently changed from a summer 2020 release to now to be announced. Is that a sign that maybe it's getting a release date at the indie event, maybe a shadow drop, or could the game potentially have been delayed out of the year? What do you guys think about that?
A lot of people saw that date and just thought, oh no, it's been delayed, it's not going to come this year. I'll be optimistic though and say, yeah, it is coming this year, and it's changed to that because it's coming out immediately. I loved Golf Story, man. That was one of my favorite 2017 games. This sidebar games of this developer who had never really put anything out before, and then they just come out of nowhere with this banger. Like they revived the Mario Golf RPG formula, and they did it extremely well with their own little taste, and own little formula, and it was just such a jolly and cozy game. So I'm all for Sports Story. I can't wait for this game. And they've been oddly quiet. So hopefully they've been quiet because they're saving up for some info drops and not because they've been put back by COVID. But yeah, my personal expectations, I want this to show. So I'm going to say, yeah, it's going to show and it's going to shadow drop.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. Like you guys were talking about No More Heroes 1 but possibly shadow dropping. For me, that didn't... I don't feel like No More Heroes 1 will shadow drop. I think we'll see that at the event, but yeah, if there's a shadow drop moment, I would say Sports Story. I mean, available TBD for me means that it's imminent, and I think that's what we're going to see.
Now, this is a game I actually just thought of because we've been talking about kind of like adventure games and Metroidvanias, and it's from Berserk Studio. And if the name doesn't ring bells, they made Just Shapes and Beats. But they have a title that's supposed to come out this year called Infernax, which is a Castlevania Zelda 2 inspired adventure game. And I played it back at PAX East, and it was amazing. And if you beat the demo at PAX East, they actually would have given you a VHS of a movie from the 1980s, because that's the aesthetic of the game. It's supposed to be gaming from the 1980s. I unfortunately got to the boss and died, and the demo took like 30 minutes, so I didn't really have the time to replay it. I really wanted to win Die Hard on VHS, and I was disappointed when I did it. And when I was talking to them, they said, yeah, the plan is for the second half of 2020, unless a company like Microsoft came to them with like a Game Pass contract and said, hey, we're going to give you a couple $1 million to make it exclusive to us. But their plan was to have it on the Switch this year. And I think that game will be shown dated. Maybe they even drop a demo for it. And I mean, it's a game that no one's really talking about. I'm not even sure if a lot of people know it exists. I mean, did either of you two even hear of Infernax before now?
I remember you talked to me about it when you were at PAX earlier this year, and I did check it out. This was a Kickstarter originally, right? This game, am I right?
I believe so.
Yeah. So I mean, I could definitely see at least more information about the game or some kind of trailer. Maybe a demo will be available as well. This is one of those real difficult ones to predict, because this could have just fallen off the face of the earth, due to various reasons, or it could be the right time to show us more of the game. But what did you think about, what was your experience like when you tried the game out at PAX? Did you feel like it was significantly, it was sufficiently polished and kind of ready to go, or did you think that it still needed work?
Oh, it was significantly polished. It played beautifully. There were no hiccups or bugs being encountered in the demo sequence. It controlled beautifully. The visuals were astounding. It really captured that whole look and feel of Castlevania and Zelda 2. And it was after I played it, I was like, I need this game now.
Yeah.
And only one other game at PAX East had given me that similar feel, and it's Cyber Shadow from Yacht Club.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a game that was supposed to come out, I believe, late last year, and it got delayed. And they had it playable at PAX East again this year. And it was curious because when I played it back in 2019, they said, oh, it's content complete. We're just going to change the positioning of some like the enemies, some of the strategies that the bosses would use, because people have been playing this demo and we don't want them basically playing the full game and, kicking ass immediately. So we're going to change up some of the difficulty and stuff. And I mean, that was 18 months ago, and we really haven't heard much about the game. So I could see Cyber Shadow definitely getting a release date at this event. And I know we keep saying this game's going to shadow drop, but Cyber Shadow kind of feels like a shadow drop type of release to me.
Cyber Shadow is shadow dropping?
Yes.
I'm sticking to Sports Story shadow dropping. Cyber Shadow will get a release date though. That's my pick.
I mean, I guess unless they've overhauled it and added a bunch of new stuff, then Cyber Shadow sounds like it can come out whenever. I was trying to place which game Infernax was, and it clicked with me. That is the brutally gory-looking side-scroller.
Yes.
I remember watching gameplay of that, and there was this close-up, fully animated pixel art scene where someone's jaw just comes off when you hit them with, like,
Yes.
with an axe, and it's so brutal. It looks amazing. I can't wait for this, man. So I'm gonna say that because I want to play that. I'm gonna say that's coming out very soon, and it's gonna be at this event.
Yeah, Infernax, it really is a great game. And yeah, hopefully it gets dated. It's kind of that perfect October Halloween game because it does have the Castlevania vibes and you fight like werewolves and stuff and witches. So it'd be that perfect October release. And I hope it's highlighted here. The game deserves it. It is fantastic from what I played. And I think it's going to surprise a lot of people because when I was talking to the developers, one of their favorite games is Zelda 2. And they were saying, I don't know why so many people hate Zelda 2. He's like, I guess when you go from the first one to that, you're kind of like, what is this weird 2D Zelda? He's like, or if your first game was Link to the Past and you went back to play Zelda 2, you're kind of like, this game's really weird. He's like, but when we combine that element of what Zelda 2 was with Castlevania, and you can still move when you're jumping, so if you get hit, you still have some forward momentum. He's like, it completely changes like the feel of the games. He's like, because now you don't feel so helpless. You don't just fall and die into a pit because you got hit by a bat. He's like, we've really looked at Zelda 2 with like the down thrust and everything. He's like, and this is a passion project of ours. He's like, because of our love for Zelda 2. He's like, and I hope when people play it, they can see the similarities to that underappreciated Nintendo release of Zelda 2 and just kind of maybe go back to and be like, hey, this game wasn't as bad as I, thought. So Infernax, yes, date it, show it, get people excited. Because I've hyped myself all of for this game again, and I'm going to be really disappointed if we don't see it now. Let's go with PixelJunk Eden 2. It was announced back in March for summer 2020 release, and we haven't heard from it in 6 months. Do you think Nintendo will show it again? They do kind of have this weird tradition that if they highlighted you once at an indie show, they don't highlight you again. But with the summer 2020 release that was supposedly penned for this game, it seems like why not date it at this event or shadow drop it?
Yeah, man. I mean, when does summer wrap up? 4 weeks from now? I mean, we got to see this game now, right? It's time.
Yeah, I mean, that's my thought.
Yeah, I think we often fall into this pattern of trying to figure out patterns, like trying to we make these connections and think those are the rules, those can never be broken, and they can easily break them. I can definitely see a bunch of indie games that we've seen before in these presentations just resurfacing again. There's nothing to stop them.
And you know what game's probably going to resurface to the joy of everybody? Bakugan.
Yeah, I mean,
that indie game is such a stretch.
Bakugan.
It's WayForward. I mean, WayForward likes to appear in these events, and I mean, they maybe they don't want to show Bakugan again after the public reception of it after the Partners Direct just last month, last month after the live stream of Paper Mario. But it does need a release date. They've only dated it for, I think they just said it was coming out in November, without a specific date. So I have a hard time seeing an indie world presentation not have a WayForward game in it.
Yeah, I think it'll be a quick 20-second trailer and a date, and then they'll just move on to the next thing.
Don't even show it. Just date it and say, okay, moving on.
Just have the logo come up, Bakugan coming out this day. Yep, that's all we're giving this now. Now, speaking of WayForward, at the Limited Run event, Limited Run Games had their own presentation, and they announced Shantae Game Boy Color is coming to Switch this year. And like we said, WayForward's always in these indie events, and Shantae is, their staple franchise. Could we see Shantae Game Boy Color get a more prominent placement at this event with maybe an exact release date? What do you guys think of that?
Well,
that'd be cool.
As someone who is intimately familiar with that game, because I'm developing that game right now, I can tell you that I don't know what the plan is as far as when it is going to be released, but there is a likelihood that we would see it at this event. But I want to stress to everyone listening that I have no idea, because I'm not privy to those conversations, of course.
How about Untitled Goose Game DLC? I feel like that game is ripe for like a little extra, maybe like a small village of DLC, or even just new items in the existing village, just to give the game a little more, longevity, because we do have the retail release coming up, and what better way to sell the upcoming retail release with some free DLC? You think there's any chance that developers in the last 8 to 10 months have had time to make new content that they could patch into this?
This is more of an idea for a sequel than DLC, but what I want is for the Goose to have a bunch of chicks, and we have like 7 chicks on screen at once. And it's like a co-op game now. So each of your friends can control 1 chick each, just causing havoc around the town. That's probably a bit too ambitious for DLC, but I'd love just get multiple chaotic geese in there.
You've really thought this one through. I like it.
You've had a lot of thought.
You could do it like a Command and Conquer strategy style game where it's basically the Goose and a bunch of chicks, and you're basically sending chicks out as units and attacking the other base and stuff. That's a cool idea.
That sounds like Pikmin.
Gotta get this to happen now.
It has to happen now. We need the Pikmin with geese.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh no, here they come! Everyone, ring the bell.
I can for sure see this happening though. Not this idea, but the DLC happening. I think it should be pretty easy just to give like a new town, a new part of the town to explore, and have some more chaotic things to go on in there. Because this was one of the biggest indie phenomenons of recent memory, and especially now because everyone's indoors and a lot of people already own this game. It should be pretty accessible just to give you like a cheap little downloadable bonus to get.
Yeah, that'd be a nice little thing. Just like, hey, here we go. Even if it's like holiday themed, or if it's snowing in the village or something. Just a little extra flair to get people to revisit it. Because it was a fantastic game. It was a phenomenon when it came out. There was a bunch of memes. You had brands using it. I remember the World Series had the Goose steal the trophy from the other team. To like, haha, we won. And I mean, that's very rare for a game to achieve that type of status. Animal Crossing is doing a similar thing right now, but that just shows you how far Goose Game really went beyond just the scope of video games. It touched mainstream culture, and I'm sure the developers are aware of how far this game's reach was, and you have to imagine they were sitting in their office like, if we can get some DLC out, if we can get something ready, we can, we want to do it. But I mean, a lot of challenges that hit development this year, so really unsure. Now, here's a big wild card.
Wait, I wanted to bring up something about Goose Game real quick. So they just announced the physical version, right? So do you think that has any bearing on DLC at all?
Is the physical published by House, or is someone else handling that?
I think it's someone else, I believe. I'll have to go back and look at my notes, but it's not House.
Skybound.
Yeah, I think it's
Yeah, Skybound Games is publishing it.
Mm-hmm. So I guess my question there is, do you announce a physical and get people excited about the physical, and then drop a DLC, and then people are like, well, why didn't you kind of hold on that until we got a complete edition or something like that? Or do you think it doesn't really have any bearing on stuff like that?
I mean, if it's like affordable DLC, let's say like a $10, well, actually that'd be high because the game was only like $15. So let's say it's free DLC.
Mm-hmm.
Then, I mean, I don't think it should matter that much. Like,
right.
You bought it on a physical cart, you put it in, you got free DLC. Like, yeah, it's taking up, a gig of your memory, but it's not that big of a deal. If you're going to throw like a tantrum over that, it's kind of like there's bigger patches of physical games where all they added was like a voice track. So,
yeah.
But I mean, it can just be a timing thing too.
This is for sure the kind of game that can benefit from free DLC, like just getting the word back out there again. Because it dominated Twitter when it came out, and you still sometimes see it, but it's mostly died off from there. But just getting that word back into social media is enough to push it to people who didn't buy it in the first place. So, like, free DLC still could have a very powerful effect on their profits.
That's true, because it could drive people to either download it again from the eShop, like who, they had forgotten the game came out. They didn't buy it when it originally launched for whatever reason. Now it's like, oh yeah, I really want to play that game. Now I have the choice between a physical edition or the digital edition and this free DLC. So it could, and all the people who have already played it, you get them back into the game, and you're going to see that trending on Twitter. You're going to see new YouTube videos. And that's exactly what you want as a developer and a publisher. You want your game back in that media spotlight. So I'd say there's definitely potential, and I'd love to see House drop some DLC and announce it at this event. It's probably a pipe dream, but let's keep our fingers crossed for the Goose to come honking onto that screen, because I think a lot of people, I could see a few live reactions of people sitting there losing their minds if all of a sudden you just heard honk. Oh my god. So here's a wild card for this event. It's kind of reaching that phenom status right now, and it is Fall Guys. The developers had talked about this. If people want a Switch version, could they have been tricking us and they had Fall Guys ready for Switch all this time, and they're going to announce it, and maybe I'm not gonna say shadow drop because it's too soon since the PlayStation 4 release, but maybe say it's coming out before the end of the year. Is there any chance we see that happen?
Yes, I think so. I mean, this is something that I predict that we'll see. You're right. It's not a shadow drop, but I mean, it would be nuts to be to hold Fall Guys for the Switch. I mean, the game itself can run on the Switch without any issue whatsoever. You've seen what it looks like. You've seen how it plays. Why wouldn't you get this game on the Switch as soon as possible? So yes, I would expect that there would be an announcement for this game.
I was just thinking to myself, like, why would there be a Switch version complete already? But then again, Sony could have very likely made a little contract, because it's a PlayStation Plus game right now. So they could have very easily just made it exclusive for that month, because they're just trying to push PS Plus for that. So yeah, I could definitely see a Switch version being complete going off that mindset. So maybe it is ready to go. But absolutely, this game is no doubt coming to Switch. No doubt in my mind. It's definitely coming. But whether it's coming so soon, I don't know.
Yeah.
I'll say it is, but I'm not entirely sure.
And I think this is the announcement that will make this showcase a pretty okay one to this is actually a pretty good showcase, because that'll get a lot of fans really psyched for the game.
Like, it's one of the biggest games right now.
It is, but I mean, right now we're talking about the potential of having Hollow Knight, SilkSong, Ori, and the Will of the Wisps,
Yep.
Cyber Shadow, and Cuphead DLC. And you think Fall Guys would be the push to make it an exceptional show?
I think so.
Yeah, I think it would. I think it's bigger than all those games.
Yeah, I agree.
Ooh, maybe. I should probably boot up my PS4 and start playing it.
I'm not saying it's better than all those games, but it's definitely bigger right now.
It's a hype announcement. Yeah, I agree. It's not better than those games. I mean, but as far as an announcement that really will just pop off, I would say that would be the one.
Now, we typically see Devolver Digital to some capacity at pretty much every indie world. At the last one, we had Exit the Gungeon, and I'd imagine they're going to have some random game here. You really can't predict what Digital Devolver has. They just kind of release games at a whim, and typically they are quality. You think we're going to see something from Devolver Digital at this event, whether it's another Gungeon or just a title that no one's ever even heard of because they've never announced it yet?
I mean, they announced so much in their Devolver Digital E3 that they ran out of announcements. What more do they have?
That's a good point.
No, I think they will. I'd be shocked if we go this entire event with no Devolver Digital.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're kind of a staple of Nintendo indie showcases at this point, because they've had so much success on the Switch as a platform. And I'd have a hard time seeing them not be here. You think Nintendo's going to have some random indie title of their own? Like, we've seen the Stretchers, we've seen Snipper Clips. You think Nintendo kind of comes up with their own little thing from an indie studio that they're going to publish, and maybe they shadow drop it at the event in typical Nintendo style? Or you think if Nintendo has a smaller scale game, they hold it off for their own bigger direct later this summer?
There's always a chance they can always publish another indie's work or work with them. I was thinking of another collaboration, though, somewhat in the sense of Cadence of Hyrule. Mm-hmm. And I was just going over like what IPs would be good for a certain indie. And I thought, it's been a long time since we've had a Wario Land game. The last one, I think, was Wario Land 4 on the Game Boy Advance. So what if Image and Form, the developers of SteamWorld Dig, were working on a brand new Wario Land game?
That would be exciting, but do you think they're big enough to handle Gunk for the Xbox Series X and a Wario game for the Switch?
Maybe. I mean, they're very different scaled projects, and they also have they merged to be Thunderful games. So I guess there's a lot more staff to spare. But yeah, I mean, it's tricky to say, but I think they'll be a great fit for the Wario Land series.
It would be, because they really have good 2D artists there, especially what we see with the SteamWorld Dig series and SteamWorld Heist. That type of animation would work perfectly for like a Wario Land game. That has me intrigued. If that happens, it'd really be a cool, like, okay, I see you, Image Form. See what you guys are up to in Nintendo. You guys are spreading your wings a little bit, going to some European developers and getting them to make franchises no one else wants to do. I'd be open to that. Now, you think we see another game from Shinnen? They just had the Taurus come out last year. They're not a big studio by any means. You think there's a chance that maybe they had another project in addition to the Taurus, or you think we're probably waiting another year or so before we see Shinnen offer us another Switch game?
So Shinnen are around, I think they're 7 staff big. At least that's what they were like at the release of Fast RMX. So they might have gotten a bit bigger since then. But they just released the Taurus on Xbox One and PC. So I would imagine if they are working on something, I wouldn't think it would be so soon. They're probably using a lot of resources just to get the Taurus out. So yeah, I think this is probably a bit too early for Shinnen.
Yeah, it's kind of unfortunate. I was kind of hoping to see another, a fast RMX from them, because it is a quality game. I know people keep saying, "Oh, give them F-Zero." They're not big enough for an F-Zero, and fast RMX.
That's too much for them.
Yeah, and fast RMX really doesn't have that much in common with F-Zero. It's actually closer to a Wipeout. But
what about Iridian? They can reboot Iridian from the GBA days.
They could. Cool. That was actually pretty impressive tech for the GBA at the time. It was kind of like, these guys are wizards, and they've kept that title. They continue to impress with their, their visuals and performance, to the point where people wonder, what is the studio doing? Especially when you look at the size of their games. Like Fats RMX came in, I think it was like 700 megabytes.
Something crazy like that. And the first Fast on WiiWare, like the WiiWare FAR limit was around 40 megabytes, 50 megabytes. And Fast Racing League was one of the best looking titles on Wii. Like these guys are stunning every single time. Even if I don't think they're going to show anything here, I've just got to push the Taurus. If you've not played that game yet, give it a go. It's stunning. Like they do stuff with the Switch that no other developer can do, and they're so small. It's crazy that a studio of this size can make something so beautiful.
And it's on Game Pass, so if you do have an Xbox One, you can download it for free from Game Pass right now and enjoy this very unique puzzler, because it is a unique game. It offers a lot of not really complex puzzles, but thought-provoking puzzles. And when you figure them out, you'll sit there and be like, wow, that was actually really clever of the developer to think of that. So definitely give it a look if you have Game Pass. And if you have the Switch, you can download it from the eShop now too. So, give Shinnen some love. They deserve it. How about just like some random predictions you guys may have from some of the developers or publishers we haven't really talked about today? You guys have anything?
What about let's see, what about we talked about Devolver. I mean, who's there's a studio that we haven't even mentioned yet, right? What about the No Man's Sky folks? That they're working on a game right now.
Yes, they announced the game for the Switch. Was it at the last Indie World?
Yeah.
Last Campfire?
Last Campfire. What about that one? That feels like we're ready to see something.
It does, because we're coming to the tail end of the summer, and when you think of camping, I think of autumn. Like when I was a Boy Scout, we went camping in October, and just from the title, The Last Campfire, I kind of think of, maybe you could date it now. We're at the end of August for an October release, and it'd be a good time to do it, because Hello Games is, they're not a hugely popular indie name, but people know No Man's Sky, and I'd highlight the game again, especially if you have the release date around the corner, because you want the Switch to be the lead platform in terms of sales for it, and it does seem like a title that would do well on the Switch. So I could see The Last Campfire definitely appearing in the show.
That would be kind of my outside pick. That we'll see more of that game. We saw it obviously back in March, but again, I think we're ready to get a a date on that game.
Definitely.
Can we talk about a weird elusive game? So this was one of the biggest indie titles in the world when it came out, Super Meat Boy. And they announced a sequel, Super Meat Boy Forever. It feels like 6 years ago. It's been a long time since they first announced that game. And it was even in an indie presentation once, and then it just went quiet again. I think it must have been a year or two since we last saw that. What is going on with that game?
Oh, I would imagine it comes down to that publisher. They seem to just suck games into a void, like 90s racing game, or 90s arcade racer. Super Meat Boy Forever is apparently Duke Nukem Forever. It's going to take a long time to come out. And didn't we had a Super Meat Boy come out, a couple years ago? It was which one was it? The original Super Meat Boy? Did they come out with the running one?
So the running one is Forever.
That is Forever.
So
oh god.
they ported Super Meat Boy to Switch. I think in the first year, maybe the second year of Switch. But yeah, Forever is the follow-up, and it's an auto runner. Which, like, not to generalize the genre, but I wouldn't think that would take so long to put out there, considering it's so highly curated that there isn't that much room for error. So yeah, I don't really know what's taking this game so long.
Unless maybe because of the reception of it being in that genre instead, they've looked at it and reevaluated it, and maybe they're changing the core design. Otherwise, yeah, it's odd that it's taken this long for this game to come out. And I mean, I can only imagine it comes down to that publisher, because they actually haven't had a game in a while on the Switch.
No, they've been quiet. I wonder if that's just a PR tactic, just to like lay down low and hope that all that stuff blows over, and then just come back and pretend nothing happened. Because yeah, they've been really quiet.
Yeah, after all the allegations and such came forward, they haven't been vocal about anything. And I think the last Switch release was in 2019. I think it was Redout. I don't think they've released anything since then.
I think you're right.
And it was weird because they were one of the bigger supporters of the Switch in the early days. In those like first 2 years, they had numerous games coming out. It felt like every few months they were dropping a new release. Like, you had Cave Story around launch, which was a huge success for them. They had Isaac, which was another big release. But then we got into those weird type of projects. What was the fighting game where they had a bunch of their properties in it?
Blade Strangers, I think it was called.
Yes, that's it. Blade Strangers. And we're still waiting on... They were supposed to bring... what was the other game they had that's similar to Super Meat Boy? Has like the 1,000 spikes. Right. Is that it?
Yeah.
It's actually called 1,000 Spikes.
I think that's what it's called, yeah.
Yeah, that was supposed to be coming. Like, they even had the insert in some of their games, like coming soon. And it's like 2 years later, it's still not here. So it might be a PR tactic where they're hoping things blow over. And knowing Nintendo, you don't want to really associate your brand to that type of company, so you probably wouldn't highlight them in an indie world.
Sure.
And then another company who's been a pretty big Switch supporter is Chucklefish. They brought Stardew Valley, which still charts. And one of the games that they are publishing is Inmost. And the developer put up a blog post back in July saying, due to super secret reasons, we can't give you a release date yet. And to me, that just screams, because we're going to be in the indie world presentation and we're going to give you a release date. And so I'd expect to see Inmost at this event. And I mean, if people don't know what it is, they should probably look up the trailer. It's actually a pretty neat looking game. And this game kind of feels ripe for a shadow drop, especially with that wording, super secret reasons. And Chucklefish is no stranger to shadow dropping games on the Switch, especially during these, a direct or an indie world presentation. They kind of just like, hey, here's our latest game. It's released right now. Buy it. And that's always hype. That's always hype inducing. When a game is available right now, after the event you're watching, you kind of just impulsively buy it because you got the hype from the trailer and you're like, oh man, I need this game. Don't even know what the game is, but you're gonna buy it.
I'm fairly confident that a lot of games we've spoken about over this podcast will surface in this presentation, but this one in particular, just using the word super secret, that immediately says, like, yeah, there's no doubt in my mind that's definitely going to be there. It's almost reckless of them to use that wording, because it's so obvious to make that connection.
Yeah, if I was Chucklefish, I'd kind of be like, come on, guys. We could have worded this a little better, not to kind of imply you're in something coming up soon. But I wouldn't be surprised to see Chucklefish also have another game in this presentation. They do publish a lot of indie software, and Switch has been very good to them. So I wouldn't be surprised to see another title from Chucklefish in addition to Inmost be shown. I mean, the vast majority of games in this presentation, probably like 30% are going to be random indies that we definitely did not predict, because it's just impossible to really give solid 80% predictions of an indie show. Because as we stated at the beginning, there's going to be so many random games that nobody would ever think of. And some indie games we likely forgot about because they could have been announced a year and a half, 2 years ago, and they just kind of disappeared like Super Meat Boy forever. And, you know, that's kind of why you have these presentations. When a game is no longer talked about, you resurface at an event like this and get people excited again. So, I mean, people can leave in the comments below any of the games they think maybe at the show that we didn't touch on. But I think the predictions are pretty solid. I think we put together a good indie show, which typically means we made a show better than what it will be in reality, because predictions never live up to reality. Somehow we won't get a single thing that we just talked about.
We can go even further. Let's say like Ori's going to be in Smash.
And they'll announce it at this event.
Yeah, so Ori and the Will of the Wisps, Battletoads, and then Ori and Smash. There you go.
I think some of our predictions will drop on the event. But you're right. I mean, generally speaking, you know, if everything that we predicted was happening, you know, what would you give a rating out of 10 or an A through F on the show as a result?
I mean, if they came to the show with SilkSong, Fall Guys, Will of the Wisp, Cuphead DLC, I mean, I think just with that little grouping, I'd probably give it an A.
Yeah, that's a 9 out of 10 for me, maybe higher.
Yeah, I'm not sure you can really get much better than that.
Yeah.
Especially if No More Heroes HD is shadow dropping or coming out around then. That's the ultimate indie lineup. I think the thing I love seeing from these presentations the most is those brand new out of nowhere games that just look great, and those are hard to predict. But those usually make the presentation for me. But just having those huge, well-known titles, I mean that's at least a 9.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like remember when they announced Untitled Goose Game? Who would have ever predicted a game where you're a goose stealing people's possessions? Nobody would have predicted that type of game in a million years. And when it was shown, it was that game that everyone's like, oh my God, I have to play that game when it comes out later this year. And that is the fun of these indie shows, is that just out of nowhere release. So hopefully we see something to that tier in this event. I mean, I'm sure we will see something. They always deliver. Indies are always the company you can count on to bring us something unique that the industry would otherwise not have. And that's kind of the gift of an indie developer. They can experiment and just craft these out of world ideas. So it's definitely an event to be excited for. I'm excited to see what Nintendo and the indie partners have for us. Let's look at some of the Streamlab questions, because we do have quite a few. We had a $3.50 donation from Avatar Diggs. Thank you for your donation. And they wrote, easily my favorite podcast right now. Thanks to you, MVG, and your many guests for such great commentary. Why don't we see Valve working to develop Steam Link into a platform to compete against xCloud and Stadia? I don't know.
It's a good question. It seems like that they've all but abandoned Steam Link, though, right? I mean, it was something that they were pushing pretty heavily a couple of years ago, until you could actually buy a Steam Link, you know, for like $5 on Steam, and it costs more in shipping to actually get shipped to your house. You know, I don't know. I mean, it's a good question. I just feel like they kind of dabbled in that space, but Valve being Valve, they just kind of moved on to something else quickly, you know, which was Half-Life Alyx, and you know, who knows what they're working on now. But it just seems like to me that they're not really interested in getting back into that space right now because obviously things have moved quite quickly since they were, utilizing the Steam Link.
Yeah,
Yes.
I'd also say that Microsoft, they kind of need that other pillar there. Moving into the next generation, they clearly have multiple setups. They got the Series X, they got the Series S, and they have Game Pass with xCloud in there. And the big differentiator with xCloud, I guess, is Game Pass, having access to all those games at once. Whereas Steam, they are very successful just doing what they do. I think Microsoft needs xCloud far more than the other companies need that kind of service.
Yes. And then we had a $3 donation from Diane Allister, who writes, "Glad to have you back. I'm picking up my Xbox Series X day one since Game Pass is cheap and Switch first party is not." Then they did an emoji of their tongue sticking out. "Still, how much faith do you have in Microsoft delivering on their first party or their first plans or future plans with good games and not Fable 3s? I really hope it works out." I'd have faith in Microsoft delivering some quality first-party projects because they looked at the Xbox One, they learned from their mistakes. The only problem is that this gen is kind of starting a year to 2 years earlier than what Microsoft needed. If they could have started next gen in like 2022, they would have been in a far healthier position. They started to buy up a lot of these studios and expand their first-party efforts too late into the Xbox One generation to take advantage of them in, a quick recovery time. They really need the 2022, 2023 for these teams to start building their games. So 2020 and 2021 are going to be rough for Microsoft, but as soon as we hit 2022, you're really going to see Microsoft's first-party efforts begin to shine, and hopefully it gets back closer to the days of what we saw with Microsoft in the Xbox original or even early Xbox 360 days, where they were committed to delivering their own IP and single-player experiences. So it's really, we still have to play wait and see with Microsoft, but I do have faith and confidence that they will deliver on the promises that they have put forth. We just have to be patient and see what the next 2 years really develop into for them. But I mean, they may never achieve Nintendo status with first party, and they may not even reach Sony status this gen, but they're going to get close. So
yeah, and I think to add to that, the delay of Halo should kind of tell you that they do, you should have faith in them, right? I mean, they could have somehow shoehorned that game to come out this year, piecemealed it, and it would have been a disaster for them, but they would have just kind of taken it on the chin, I guess. But the actual delay of that game kind of really speaks to, Phil Spencer and how he does care, and they do want to get their standard at a much higher level than they have in the past. So yeah, I would say have faith in them for sure. But you're right, Nate. I think the system is coming out probably about a year too early.
yes.
I'm really excited for their future too. I just finished Halo 5 on my phone this morning, which is crazy. I've been playing xCloud I've been playing it every day. It's crazy how well it works, and having so many ways to play games is crazy. Like, let's say you have a group of friends on Xbox, you can literally just hop in on your phone now. You don't have to buy an Xbox to join them. It's such a huge difference what other consoles are doing, and that's such healthy competition. They have their own little niche now, which no other console quite stands in. And like even this month, they're launching Microsoft Flight Simulator and Battletoads, so they definitely are upping their first party game. And yeah, they would obviously like to be a bit further on. They haven't shown us what Fable looks like yet. They haven't shown us what most of their games look like yet. So right now it's just kind of Halo Infinite that we're relying on. And I love that they are going for the quality with that one. So yeah, personally, I'm really excited for what they go for. They seem to be the one to watch this gen, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And then we had a $15.10 donation from General Tao, who wrote, "You and MVG have lots of great, well-balanced discussions. I really appreciate how well informed, Streamlabs made that look weird, how well informed you folks are. It's refreshing. Keep it up." Thank you, General Tao. And now we get into the interesting thread of donations. And we had a $3 donation from Dill Spouser, who writes, "Question. How do you feel about the Reset Era direct speculation thread?" I'll let John field this one first.
Oh no. Okay. So I sometimes pop in there just to chat in general, and I find a lot of the people who comment in there are very friendly. They have a lot of fun things to talk about. Sometimes it can get a bit crazy though. Let's say a rumor's floating around. I think it can sometimes get a bit unhealthy with discussion, but for the most part, it's well intentioned. I think it can just get a bit much if you put so much time into it. But if you're just in there to have fun, then that's all good. But there's a balance.
Yes, it is a fun thread that sometimes does get a little carried away, but most of the people there are just there to enjoy themselves. So
yeah,
it's an entertaining thread to check in on every now and then. Then we had a $5 donation from Dill Spouser, who wrote, "Embrace the hate." That's right. Then we had a $10 donation from Dill Spouser, no message. A $5 donation from Dill Spouser that said, the good word of Dill must be spread. Also love the podcast. Thank you. And we had another $5 donation from Dill Spouser, followed by a $3 donation from Dill Spouser, followed by a $5 donation from Dill Spouser, then a $10 donation from Dill Spouser, and another $10 donation from Dill Spouser, who wrote, "For Dill." And then a $10 donation from Dill Spouser, followed by a $5 donation from Dill Spouser, who writes, "Keep doing what you're doing. Take care. Thank you." Then a $20 donation from Dill Spouser, who writes, "Bless." A $9 donation from Dill Spouser. Then a $10 donation from Demi Mew 14, who writes, "Hello. I'm from Germany and watch your videos in YouTube and read your posts on Resetter. Thank you for your inside information and good work." Thank you, Demi. We then had a $10 donation from Backstreet Back All Right, who writes, "Great, I sacrificed my username and my money. This better be worth it, winky face." Then we had a $6.90 donation. I see what you did there, from Dill Spouser. A $5 donation from Dill Spouser, who writes, "What are your expectations for the next Breath of the Wild?"
History will be made.
I want to pet the dog this time.
Yes. That is a good expectation. We should be able to pet the dog, not just have him sit there and stare at us and give him a raw steak.
Yeah. I also want to fly on a Loftwing. I want to take to the skies.
Those are good ideas. I mean, especially what we saw with the trailer, it seems like the castle is going to be flying above the ground now for some supernatural reason. So hopefully we get to take more flight, because the game had a lot of verticality to it. So flight is probably the biggest area they could really innovate and expand upon in the game.
Yeah.
Then we had another $5 donation from Dill Spouser, who says, "Wanted to make it an even 10. Thank you." And finally, a $10 donation from Dill Spouser with no message. And that would conclude the Dill Spouser saga.
I'd be so confused going into this if you hadn't explained to me what Dill Spouser was before we started.
Yeah.
Because you were talking about it, I was like, who on earth is Dill Spouser? And then you showed me this remarkable image of the man himself. So
Yes,
I'm glad I'm informed.
Everyone's going to be seeing that beautiful image in the video on YouTube. So if you're listening on Spotify, iTunes, or Google Podcasts, I do advise you to check the YouTube video to see the beautiful portrait that is Dill Spouser, the fusion of Doug Bowser and Phil Spencer, and enjoy the nightmares that will come that evening. That will conclude today's episode. I would like to thank John from GameXplain for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me.
Always a pleasure to have you with us. And I'd like to thank MVG for joining us as well.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for coming on, John, and talking shop with us. It's been awesome.
Yes, it has. It has been fun. Hopefully some of our predictions come true, and hopefully it got people excited about the Indie World event. Let's hope that even if 50% of what we predicted happens, I think it would be a very exciting and enjoyable show for everybody. But until next time, continue to embrace the hate.